Welcome back to the Carp Chronicles podcast, episode number 49, which would be episode number 51. We deleted 2, so it's episode number 49. So welcome along. We're nearly at the magical 50, so exciting times ahead. And on that note, I've got exciting news for you today. Now, on several episodes, I've been mentioning my high refined milk protein base mix that I've been working on for the last few years and that will soon be out to market. And that time is now. It is available to you, the good public. It's been in testing for quite some time, a long time, in fact, and it has undergone so many tweaks and so many different testing periods. It is just unreal. It's been quite tiring, but really, really exciting and interesting. But nonetheless, the bait is now available. I'm calling this Hydro Milk on the account of the fact that, well, it's a milk base mix and there are a lot of hydrolyzed milk proteins in there. If you don't know, hydrolyzed milk proteins are extremely attractive to carp. They can be very tricky to use and very tricky to use at high levels, not to mention expensive. I mean, all milk proteins these days are very expensive, but no more so than these specialist hydrolyzed milks. But anyway, it's quite difficult to use these hydrolyzed milk proteins at high levels. I've cracked the code. I've managed to do it. They are in there at high levels. There are more traditional milks in there as well. Calcium caseinate, rennet casein, etc., etc. They're in there as well alongside these modern hydrolyzed milks. And for me, this is where it's at with milk protein baits. The inherent issue with milk protein baits is they kind of lock up, they take a long time to break down in the water, and they take a long time to be attractive to carp, and they're just massively indigestible. They will clog the carp up, the carp will stop feeding on them, and basically it's a shame because milk proteins offer such amazing attractive properties and nutritional properties, but they're often locked up in this ball that isn't that attractive because it's not being solubilized and it's not that digestible by the carp. I've overcome this. It's a method I use called Digestamil, which is my own kind of system of additives and different things that basically make the milk proteins much more digestible and bioavailable to the carp. So when the carp eat these baits, it will pass through them in a good amount of time, but more to the point, they'll actually be able to digest the different proteins and goodness and nutrients that's inside the bait. So it's quite complex. As I said, it's taken a long time to get right, and it's quite a unique bait. It's very, very different from anything else out on the market. If you're looking for a bait to use that is vastly different from everyone else and that the carp are going to absolutely love and it's going to do them the world of good, then I would strongly recommend you take a look at this bait. Again, it is not a cheap bait because of the high levels of hydrolyzed milks and refined milk proteins in there, but luckily you don't need to use it in the huge quantities that you would do other baits. So there we go. I could literally talk about this bait for a full podcast. I'm thoroughly passionate about it. For the right kind of person, the right kind of angler and the right kind of water, this is absolute gold dust. It's not for everyone. I completely understand that. It's not for every water. It's not for every campaign. Absolutely not. And if you're unsure if it's for you, reach out to me. I'm most active on Instagram, but you can get hold of me on Facebook as well. If you search Carp Chronicles on social media, we will pop up. But yeah, I mean, it's a big decision to switch baits and to get onto a bait and put your faith and confidence in it. It's quite a big deal, as silly as that sounds. It is a big deal because you've got to be confident in it. So if you have any questions, you want to kind of pick my brains about it, by all means, reach out, message me. I will give you as much information as I can on it and make sure it's right for you before you proceed. That's it for the bait talk. You can find it on optibaits.com, optibaits.com. You'll be able to order it on the website, read the blurb about it, and as I said, if you want to ask me questions, reach out on social media. Of course, we have got Stephen White on this episode, but before I mention that, this episode is proudly sponsored by BP Milling. Check them out if you don't know them already. You really should do. They create sustainable feeds for fisheries, and you can find what they're all about at bpmilling.co.uk. Check him out on YouTube as well. He's got some awesome content on there. So this episode is with Mr. Stephen White, who has appeared on this podcast before. We had a 2-part episode, I think about 2 years ago, which went down very, very well. Stephen is super passionate about bait, highly knowledgeable, very interesting. He has very interesting ideas about bait and bait formulation and what you should do in what circumstance. So yeah, really interesting stuff. This was one episode that we recorded, but I'm going to chop it into 2 halves because it's well over 4 hours worth of audio. So just to kind of make it a bit more bite-sized and digestible for you. Pun not intended. This is part 1, and then I'll release part 2 in a week or so. So Stephen does mention bait in the first few minutes of this podcast, but pretty much the first kind of 50 odd minutes is Stephen recounting his angling since he's been on the podcast. So some carpy tales, his different captures, how he's gone about them. It's a bit of a monologue piece, if you like, which is akin to Stephen's style. He's a great talker, and he's great at relaying a story. So I'm sure you'll enjoy that. Those first kind of 50 minutes, there's something for everyone. You don't have to be a bait buff or a bait geek to enjoy that. But then after that kind of 50-ish minute mark, Stephen does start getting into the depths of bait talk. We talk about fermentation, organic acids, all different kind of stuff, and we have a little bit of a kind of exchange of views on bait and things like that. And a similar story for part 2, which, as I said, I'll release in a week or so. So that's it. I feel like I've been waffling for ages in this intro, so apologies about that. Nothing more to be said. I will leave you with the awesome Stephen White.
And I was laughing when you and Dean were saying how old you are. You're 38 and Dean's what's Dean, 45, 48?
Too old.
Yeah, I'm 53 in November, mate.
You're 53?
In November, yeah.
No, Dean's 50 as well, I think, isn't he?
I'm sure he said he was 48 or something. He's late 40s, I'm sure.
Yeah. You're 53? I did not know that.
Well, I'm 52 in 10 months at the moment, but yeah.
You genuinely don't look it, and we were just saying off air, so to speak, that you're we're going off topic already, but you're looking very well, and you've lost a lot of weight, and you're looking very youthful. You've been having success with the carnivore diet, haven't you?
Yeah, it really, really have. People are saying I look 10 years younger. I also think a lot of the omega-3s. I'm smashing the omega-3s in salmon.
Yeah.
And I think that's when you find out, how good that is for you, then it's no surprise. So yeah, for the last 12 months, I've basically not been that focused on bait, but I've been focused on human nutrition. And it did actually throw something up, which has come back round to the carp fishing, which I said something we want to mention is something called the protein leverage hypothesis.
Yeah.
While I was going down the carnivore route and looking into protein and omega-3s and everything, there were these 2 researchers was on some YouTube channel, and basically they said this protein leverage hypothesis. They've done everything in fruit flies up to all species, and what he was saying is all organisms, all sort of animals as such, will keep eating calories until the protein requirements are met.
Yeah,
and that is the essence of the protein leverage hypothesis. So in fishing terms and human terms, the more protein you get, the less you actually have to eat. Yeah. Because you reach satiety because you've had all your protein needs met.
Yeah, especially on top of something like, I know you've done keto as well, which is protein sparing. So then you've got like a double pronged approach to it, haven't you?
Absolutely, yeah.
But then we're off on tangents already, aren't we? But when it comes to carp, you'd think, oh well, got to give them lots of protein then, because that's what they need. Well, actually, they're therefore going to eat less, aren't they? So you need to
but
think a bit clearer about that, you know?
Well, how I looked at it in carp fishing is with my fish meal bait, which I was using extensively from 2016, well, from 2011, but particularly on Acton from 2016 to 2018. In cold water, I was actually counting the baits and putting them in. Like in the spring when it was, like the beast from the east and all that, I was literally counting out 17 baits. And obviously they've got a lower metabolic rate in cold water, so I think it's in a really rich fish meal. I think it's in that context, it's really easy to overdo. But people say fish meals don't catch in winter. You're just giving them too much.
Yeah.
That explains it perfectly. A lot of times we know the mechanism, we know what's happening on the ground because we're seeing it. If you put a few baits in, you catch. If you put a lot in, you don't. And sometimes you can think, well, that isn't the appropriate bait for the situation, but it is. It's the amount you've got wrong. Just as an example, I had in spring 2017, I had the slope over 17 baits, and then I had it in 2017 on the harvest moon in September. I had it over 1,000 baits of the same recipe, and that is all explained by the protein leverage hypothesis. I think it does anyway.
Yeah, I think partially that, and I mean they're not moving as much in the winter anyway, so that they have less caloric requirement, don't they?
Definitely.
So there's several things that sort of play into it, isn't there? I mean, it's, but yeah, absolutely. Your hypothesis on protein sparing and meeting the requirements protein, absolutely. In like what. We're going to jump all over the place. You need to intro us with what you're doing in your angling. But whilst we're on this topic, in winter, I mean, are you feeding a lot of fats still? Or I know you're big on your fats in the summer. What are your thoughts on fats in winter?
I've only ever made one dedicated winter bait, and it's a liver, hemp, and bird food. My feelings on true cold water baits, if I was to basically my angling, I can't pre-bait, I can't put any bait in. Right? It's got to be instant. But if I was using a bait which I was pre-baiting with, then it would have no intact proteins in it. Everything would be hydrolyzed, and the rest of it will be carbohydrates and fiber.
If you were pre-baiting, you'd have all of the proteins hydrolyzed.
Yeah.
Why?
In winter, in a true cold water bait.
Why? What's your thought process on that?
Gut transit time. Just gut transit time. The proteases are obviously not working at full efficiency. So if everything's, the biggest it's going to be is a tripeptide, then the protein that the carp needs is all supplied.
I suppose the problem is in winter, I mean, you've got to make sure that you're on the fish then, don't you? Because you can put bait in winter and the carp are very inactive. They might not come across that for many, many days, in which case the hydrolyzed proteins are obviously, that there's downsides to that, isn't there?
Yeah, so some of it will leach out, but to be fair, I wouldn't, if I was pre-baiting it, that wouldn't bother me. If they don't eat it, they don't eat it. But if they do eat it, then it's instantly digestible in that they have to do very little work with the proteases to absorb those aminos.
Yeah.
They don't have a massive requirement for protein anyway, and the fiber will shove it through. I mean, in cold water, yes. I mean, some of the dying tripeptides will leach out without a doubt, but you're still left with the carbohydrates and the fiber anyway. There'll be something there because baits don't break down in cold water, do they? Not as quickly as in warm water. No. You've got less or fewer benthic organisms which are going to break it down as well. So that wouldn't bother me. But the point is, when they come across it, they're on it straight away, and it's going to go through them quickly. So that's how I would approach a cold water bait, a true cold water bait. What I have been doing in cold water in the spring in Acton is not putting any boilie in at all. It's just putting a bit of slop in and then fishing it over a hook bait.
Yeah, when you say slop, just some like crumbs of food and a load of liquids.
Well, not even crumb. Just liquidized fermented particle.
Yeah,
just a couple of spods over the top over a food bait, hook bait, and that's been doing well. The last 2 seasons, I've had the first original out of Acton in the spring. The first original what's come out, I've had it both years. So in the cold water, that seems to be working.
Yeah.
So that's what I've been doing in the spring. But you got to remember, in the spring as well, they're moving about more. The water might be just as cold as winter, but because of the daylight length, the fish are still active.
Yeah, I think as soon as those days start to draw out as well, the carp know, don't they? And they sort of have this switch, I think. This is backed up by science, just by experience, that they feel like they need to get around and they need to start fueling themselves. That's what it seems like, doesn't it?
Yeah, without a doubt. But I just haven't seen, when I've been fishing boilies, until you get to first, second week of April, I've had some really good success on the slop over a hook bait. I'll go through that when we go through what I did like this spring, because I had a good spring this year as well.
Yeah, it's perfect, isn't it? I mean, it loads of attraction, get the carp in, minimal food items to pick up. You know, they're not going to get full.
There's only really a hook bait, isn't there?
Exactly.
Big carp swims into slop. There's a lot there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, they had a rough, like, spring 2021. Obviously, we had a bit of lockdowns, and you know, and then everybody wanted to, once we could get out, everybody wanted to get out. So the lakes were busy. I managed just before the end of the season, I managed a 31, a lovely orangey mirror I had before, and then a 32-14. And then the season was over. I did a bit on Girton, had a few fish out, but nothing of note. And then we started back in June on Acton. First day back, literally the carp started spawning, so I was there for a few hours, and then 100-mile round trip, back home. So 200-mile round trip for a few hours was garbage.
Not ideal.
No, but it just happens. The weather recently has just been a nightmare for the spawning cycles. It's hot and cold, hot and cold, hot and cold. And then the week after I went back, and they were still spawning on the top lake. They were in spawning mode, and there were a few fish spawning, and some were. It was just a nightmare. So I went on the lower. I had a couple of stockies. I had a great social one, a lad called Dean, because he was the same. He said, "We'll have a social." He went at the side of me, and we just sat there. He's got a cob barbecue, and this is before I started my carnivore diet. But he was just cooking some bacon on his cob, and his rod rips off, and he caught the second biggest fish in the lake, a fish called white tips, which was the fish which was on the the promo you did for the first podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the big black fish which you put on there, that's white tips.
Right.
So we had that, and we got some amazing. It was like 10 o'clock in the morning in June, so we got some amazing pictures for him. And unfortunately, that fish has died now. So it was a really good capture. And then sort of towards the end of June, I went up on the top lake again, because that's where my targets are. First proper trip on the top lake, I had a nice 32. The game plan basically was to, that was out of African, was to target I had a start of that season, the start of the June 2021 season. I had a list of 10 fish, 10 originals I wanted to basically complete the set on Acton. And there's so many beautiful originals in there. I'm greedy enough to want every single one. So the game plan was these 10 fish, there's a good chance of they coming out of Conquering African rather than anywhere else. I thought if I can get in those 2 swims, whether or not fish are there, then that's where I'm going to go. Just to try and maximise my chances of catching these fish. Because number one on my list of fish was the picture I sent you earlier. Did you see that one, Ryan's mirror?
I didn't reply, mate. Sorry, but yeah, I saw
did
those.
You see it? Yeah. That is just carp porn, isn't it?
It's not a million miles away from that white tips, is it? It's like a leather-looking thing, male, big pecs, sort of same kind of tail.
To me, they are, but because I've looked at the pictures for sort of 7 years, so I know them intimately. I mean, they're different shapes, like
a little bit.
He's mega. He's really long when you see it.
Right.
But yeah, I know what you mean. I suppose they're all unique to me. But if you're not experienced it, then you probably, if you're not seen them on the bank as well, because a picture doesn't always do justice to the sheer length of the fish.
Yeah, they're definitely different, but they're of a similar ilk.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, I know what you mean. It's not like a fully scaled or what have you, is it? But yeah, that's my number one target. It's just a beautiful fish in the flesh. So I was concentrate on these swims. So, and then the end of June, I went in and I had an absolute beast of a fish called straight tail. Well, we call it straight tail. Just under 38, and it was just all over the lake. It's a big male, and it just beasted me. It still had its tubercles up. I had just massive clods of silkweed on the line, so my line was going straight down into the water with like 15 stone of silkweed on it, and the fish trailing behind, and it was just, I had to keep stopping, and basically the technique I've developed is turn round, put my clutch on dead light, and then as the silkweed, it jams the tip ring, so as it travels past you, try and grab it and just rip the silkweed off. But because it's quite fibrous, it's just a nightmare. Anyway, that fish stayed on and ended up netting it, so I was really happy about that. And had another original at 29. So that was a wicked trip at the end of June. It started settling down from the spawning cycle then. And then we got into, that was out of Conquer as well. And then we got into July. Another fish I really, really wanted, literally giving me left nut for, was a fish called the big leather. And it's a 40-pound leather, which I don't know what you were like when you were sort of coming up in carping, but the sort of triumvirate then was you want a 40-pound mirror, a 40-pound leather, and a 40-pound common. And I thought my only chance of a true 40-pound leather was this big leather, but it doesn't come out much. Anyway, a mate of mine, the lad in the picture who had Ryan's, Matt, he's braced the big leather twice with a 35-pound fish. So obviously they sort of swim together. They get, when the big leather comes out, it quite often gets braced with this fish. Anyway, so I have this 35-pound fish, and I'm thinking, I'm getting the big leather. I'm in the swim it comes out of, and then I had a take. And I had a chod swivel break on me. Lost a big fish. One of the cord of chod swivels snapped on me. I was absolutely wounded. I was just like, that's my chance of it, because it just does not come out much. And I thought that's it, it's done. I was just gutted.
Did I hear you right? You said the swivel broke.
Yeah, the chod swivel snapped. And they're supposed to have a 50-pound test.
Jeez.
But no, it's obviously faulty.
Oh yeah. What's a chod swivel?
Well, it's like a size 11 ring swivel, but Corda do one with a little groove in the top, so you can put putty around it.
Okay.
But I've stopped using it. I've started using the Nash one now. The Nash size 11, and they seem bulletproof. But I was absolutely gutted.
Yeah.
That was traumatic. And I had another fish called the Car Crash, which is an Acton character. ultra spawned out just over the 31 pound the car crash common.
You show me
But
that. That's got the face all mangled in, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's just, but because it's the only fish in the lake what's not immaculate. It's got a beautiful body. We also call it the Bob Fork. Body off Baywatch, face off Crime Watch. It's body of Barbie, face of Ken. It's a lovely chestnut fish, and it's actually my PB UK common, which is a bit of a. I can't get past it. I've had it at 35.4, but I just can't get past that size of a common. I can't get a big common. So that's the car crash. It's died this season, unfortunately, because the Acton fish are really old. They were stocked in sort of between 92 and 94. So they could have been, I don't know, 3 to 5, 6, 7 years old when they went in. So they're sort of they're getting on for mid 30s. They might be 35. They might be a bit older. So the longevity is an issue now. So that's why I'm so urgent to get on with it. And then sort of second week in July, I went back and I got in contact. Basically, what happened was, with the Euros were on in June 2021, and Acton was empty. It was, and I got in conquer I got an African in the opening week. Well, the third week of the season, but the first time you could actually fish it without them spawning. And then the next 4 weeks, I got in conquer 4 weeks on the bounce, which is, when a swim's hot, you can't get in it, generally speaking. So we had low pressure conditions. It was warm but low pressure. And there was no one on the lake, and I was getting in the swim I wanted to be in. So it was just awesome. So then the second week of July, I had a fish called Scar, 14.16. A fish I desperately wanted as well. I photographed it probably 4 or 5 times over the years for other people. Lovely big male, and I had that in my net. So that was about 2 a.m. Another silkweed drama. But yeah, I was overjoyed. So that was a really good start to the season. And then what happened then? Then the next 2 weeks I got tenched out. The cart went moody, and for whatever reason, the tench was just showing up about lunchtime and just clearing you out of bait. So the next couple of trips we're just tench city. So that wasn't great. But there you go. And then what happened after that? Oh yeah, basically I couldn't get down then for 6 weeks. So I missed sort of the arse end of, basically from the 5th of August up until 14th of September. I couldn't get down. So it was, and you're seeing everybody on Facebook catching and people messaging you and this, saying they were catching. It was a traumatic experience. People like having bants, so it wasn't great. So I went back on Tuesday the 14th of September 21, and that was the day I started my my keto journey. So that was the first time that I've not had pasture on the bank at Acton for a good few years. Got back in conquer, which was amazing, and first fish was a repeater straight tail, about a pound down, but 36.5. Absolute mental fight. There was a guy in another swim, a lad called Dino, who's a real character. And he said I looked like Harry Potter waving my rod about, trying to pull the silkweed out, and because he could just see me and just changing direction on the fish because it was just all over the lake. It's an absolute animal. A good 45-minute scrap, just in between clearing silkweed off and it just ploughing through weed beds and just not behaving at all. And then when was the day after? I think the day after I had the fish called Big Pecs. A fish I really, really wanted. I've seen some mega pictures of it. It had never been out while I've been on the lake. But I know people have, it came out once it came out while I was on the lake. But I've never seen it in the flesh, but I've seen loads of pictures. And yeah, off the same spot. Basically, I had straight tail at some silly time, did a recast in the dark, and you just know when it goes down on this spot that you're on the spot. And I don't know, that's good. Got back in bed, and then that ripped off on the recast about an hour later, which doesn't normally happen on Acton with a disturbance, and Big Pecs was 45.2. So I was absolutely buzzing for the first, because I hadn't been down for 6 weeks. So I was so happy when I got back. You know, and that I was desperate for that fish. That was sort of my second to third most wanted after Ryan's. My top three at the time were I wanted Ryan's, I wanted the big leather, and I wanted Big Pecs. So I had one of those, and I was overjoyed. Then what happened after that? Not a lot, to be fair. Rest of September was pretty crap. Not a lot happened. And then towards the end of October, I'm trying to find out what's going on here. And then towards the end of October, 24th of October, I went in a swim called Steps, and sometimes they get in there on a pressure drop. If they're on that side of the lake, it's 2/3 down the lake on the hillside, and sometimes you'll turn up on a pressure drop. So I thought, yeah, I'll give it a whirl. It's not the comfiest swim. It's on a bit of a steep slope, and it isn't great as a swim, but they can turn up there, and when they turn up there, they're there to feed. So there was a lot of bloodworm in the lower third of the lake, opposite that swim. So I thought I'd risk that. Turned up, and the other thing is, Ryan's has come in October from that swim. It's a bit lower down the lake, but it sometimes turns up lower down the lake on a pressure drop. So because my mate Freddie had it the year before on an absolute beast of a storm, an absolute animal of a storm, and a massive pressure drop, and he braced it with Big Pecs the year before. So I thought, October pressure drop, it's looking good. So I found a nice, like a longish spot there. Anyway, first night, 9:30, I was just nodding off in bed, and it absolutely ripped off. I mean, ripped off, but it kited to the right, and there's a lot of overhanging bushes to the right, and you can't wade out because it starts getting a bit deeper, and the silt's a bit mad. So I had this fish on, and I knew straight away it was massive. And it was just holding on a long line. It stopped kiting, it just held on a long line and was just banging its head. And I couldn't move it at all. I just could not move it. And there's no weed down there. It's just silty, and it just probably, I don't know, 5-10 minutes, it just sat there banging its head. And I just thought, I've lost it. I've no chance of getting it past it, because it had kited to my right. There's all these massive overhanging sort of willows. I thought, I've lost this fish. So I resigned myself to the fact that I was losing it. And then after about maybe 10-15 minutes, when it just sat there banging its head and just not doing anything, but the kiting wasn't getting any worse. So I just put the rod tip, I felt it move a little bit, so I just banged the rod tip right under the water and just started pumping, like really brutally pumping it. I thought, well, either the hook's going to pull or I'm going to get it past these trees. And I got it. It just came in a straight line. It didn't kite. It didn't go left or right. It literally came in a straight line. I think I just confused it with the rod tip being under the water, to be fair. And then I got it in front of me, netted it, and it was the otter tail mirror at £47.
Nice.
I'd had it in 2018. Mega spawned out under 40. And I always thought, well, if you get one of the Acton A team under 40 when they spawned out, you feel a bit cheated. I know everybody says, oh, you've caught it, it doesn't matter, but you just look immense. When they sort of 8-9 pound heavier, you just look the picture. And the OT, as you've known, he's a stunning fish. I know they all look the same to you, but close up, it's got lovely starbursts on its tail. It's just the character of a fish. But the other thing is, in September and October, it's been braced with Ryan's 3 times. So I'd caught it within sort of 6-7 hours of being there. So for the rest of the 48, I was just sweating. I didn't get another run, but if I'd got another run, I think I would have had a heart failure. I think I'd have died. But anyway, nothing else happened, and basically that was the autumn over with on the top lake. That was my last fish of the trip.
Well, how long have you? Sorry, mate. How long have you been fishing Acton now?
I mean, that was my 6th season. Then I'm now into my 7th now.
Jeez.
I never thought I'd stay on a lake that long, but I just the last few I want the full set. I want to catch every fish in the A team and a few others.
So how many more have you got to catch before you move on?
Well, there's 4 left, but I'd settle on 2. There's Ryan's, which I sent a picture of. There's the Sergeant, which I sent the picture of underneath. And then there's one called the Lord Lucan, which has got some scales on it, and massive tail scales. That does about 39. And then there's a fish called the drop tail common, which is super long common. But you want to catch that in the spring because it spawns out to about 35, and then it doesn't put any weight on until about February. So if you want it at a decent weight, because I want to beat my PB common, I'm desperate for a 40-pound common. I'd love to catch the drop tail in the spring, which will lead on to something I'm going to tell you about in a bit, because I went after the drop tail this spring and something really good happened. So back to spring 22. So we went back on in this spring. No lockdowns this spring, which was good. Let me just find my diary because I'm getting old and everything's a mystery. So I did a couple of trips in February, but nothing happened. 6th of March, I had the first original out, a starburst at 33.10, but I've had it before, but it's just nice to know that they're starting waking up. I had that at a conker, which was nice. And then the 15th of March, I went in a swim called Oak, and basically I've got some longer spots there, and I had the OT again. the 24, well, not even 24 hours into the trip, I had the OT again at 46.6, which so then I thought, Ryan's, as soon as you catch the OT, you always think there's a chance of Ryan's next. So again, I had another 24 hours where my bumhole was twitching, but nothing happened apart from a stocky on that one. But I mean, it's still to catch a mid to upper 40 in 15th of March is decent anyway.
Yeah.
Now that time basically what happened was there's loads of 2 swans and a load of coots. So I backleaded. The weed wasn't that bad, so I backleaded, and basically the fish had swum back on the backlead right towards me, and then gone up my left hand margin. I caught it sort of 60 odd yards in front of me, and it's round the side. But basically, what had happened is, as it kited, it dragged one backlead across the other one. So my left-hand rod, I caught it on the right-hand rod, but I didn't know. My left-hand rod started bending round at a rate of knots. So I went, the rods are out in the water, so I'm into the chest, it's flying out into the thing. Pick the left-hand rod up, nothing there. So then I work out what's happening, pick the right-hand rod up. And then this fish is basically, it swam 60 yards towards me. It's only a few yards out with a massive clod of silkweed on it. So I just sort of wound it in quick, netted it in a big ball of weed. And then I only thought it was small, and then it turned out it was the OT again. So that was a repeat capture, but at least I got some daytime shots this time. And then what happened I had a blank after that. Yes. Talking about the drop tail. The drop tail in the spring comes out off the dam quite a few times. Quite a few years it's done that. So on the 1st of April, I went in a swim called Potbeds, which is the corner of the dam, because it's got a form for being caught there, and I've spent a lot of time in that swim. So I know it really well. So I thought, sweet, the drop tail's coming out. I'm having the drop tail, and the Sergeant comes out of that swim as well. So I had 2, and I thought Ryan's won't be out now. So that's what I'm doing. Anyway, so I went in that swim, Set up. First night, I had just an absolutely savage take, and it was running sort of down the dam towards. There's sort of a bit of vegetation over it, and it was all grating, and I thought, oh, this is no good. It was dark, but it was sort of it was just going dark anyway. An absolutely savage fight off this fish, and it picked up my right hand rod. I had this on my middle rod. It picked up my right hander, so I'm playing it on two rods. I'm shouting up the lake. There's the kid who had the sergeant, the picture I sent you. He's called Chris. I call him Cousin Chris because he's a cousin to one of the other anglers. So we just call him Cuz, so we know we can differentiate between the Chris's. Anyway, I'm shouting at him. He's on a snooze in his bivvy. He can't hear me, so I've got an absolute disaster going on, like playing this fish on two rods. Anyway, I get it in. It's a 32 mirror, lovely original male. Looks like all the other ones. And yeah, so Chris comes down and does my pictures. And then I've only got one rod in play, and it's dark by this stage. So basically, you're trying to 3-rod trick one over. So it took me up until 11 p.m. to get both rods out. The banker rod I was expecting to catch on, it literally took me 3 hours to get that rod sorted in the dark. It was just a comedy of errors. Honestly, it was unbelievable. And then my right hander, I had to cut a load of line off, set it up, literally recast in the dark, and got a perfect drop. I just thought, oh, that was nice. Thought nothing of it, went to bed. And then the following morning at 10:30, got a take, and it came in like a bream. And then I was just about like netting. I couldn't, because I'm out in the water in my chesters. You can't really see what you're playing. They're just turning in the water. You can't see them. It didn't fight at all. Anyway, these fucking massive lips come up, and I thought, that's the big leather. Just literally from the lips, I knew it was a big leather. I've never seen it on the bank. I've just looked at so many pictures of it. But that's the big leather. And I thought, no, it can't be. It's in pot beds. It's never come from pot beds while I've been a member. But anyway, I netted it, and lo and behold, it was a big leather. Off a swim that it doesn't come out of, which was just mental. But it was under 40. It was 38.7. But I was just absolutely overjoyed, because after losing it, I just never thought I was going to catch it again. Well, I didn't know I lost it, but after the broken swivel malarkey, I thought, well, that's my chance gone. So yeah, the big leather, got a mega pick, nice water shot of it, just a beautiful big leathery old fish. So I thought, that's my chance of a 40-pound leather gone, but I'm not asked because I caught it. It's a rare visitor. So that was the 1st of April, so not much of an April Fool. And then on Sunday, went the last trip of the season. Basically, when Rob closes the lake for open access, people can rent full weeks, so they can get a taste of the lake and what have you. And Ryan's comes out the first week of open access every season nearly. It doesn't come out on the syndicate in the spring normally. But this spring the trees were like 3 or 4 weeks in front. They were budding early. The weather was fine, and I just thought, it's coming out. It's coming out a week early, definitely. And I never do 3 nights. I can only do 2 nights. But because it's the last week of the season, you can either do 48 hours a week or 72 a fortnight. But because it's the last trip and you're not coming back, you can do 3 on the last week. So I've thought it's definitely coming out. I'll just tell you this before I start this, right? In the October, I went in a swim called Pot Beds for the sergeant. I knew it was. I was absolutely guaranteed it was coming out. This was October 21. Went in Pot Beds thinking sergeant's coming out all day. My mate Terry came down. He went 2 swims up from me, and then he comes wandering down about 10, 11 o'clock. I've got one. So he wants me to go and do a picture. I go up to him, get it on the mat. It's a sergeant at his biggest ever weight, 42 pounds. So that was so I knew it was coming out, but a so-called friend caught it. Anyway, back to spring. 17th of April. I did two nights, and to do my third night, I had to drive. I did a 200-mile round trip to go and walk my dogs, to come back so I could do the final 18 hours. I was that convinced that Ryan's was coming out. So I left the lake about 10 o'clock, got back about 5, 6 o'clock to do like 18 hours. Anyway, sat there at about 11:30, midnight in the bivvy. I just had a 29.8 stocky. Put it back, just sat there. My mate Terry comes wandering round. I've got an upper 30. It's all right. So went doing his pictures, and he was in his net. He was rolling it up in the net to put it in the sling. I said, "That's Ryan's, mate. The length of it is just massive." Anyway, so he gets it on the mat. It is Ryan's 47.3.
Jeez.
Yeah. So I knew it was coming out. So my so-called mate Terry has had me 2 top target fish, both at the top weights at the time, and I've had to do the pictures. Talk about rubbing my face in it.
Savage, mate. I've been there.
Yeah. After a 200-mile round trip as well.
Yeah.
Just for an extra 18 hours thinking it's coming out. So the season started great because I caught. Basically, out of me 10, I knocked 6 off the list of 10 originals, and 5 of them I had twice. So it was job done. But the two knocked the polish off it because I had to do the pictures of both of them. So fair play, Terry.
Gotcha.
No, but it happens. I'm never bitter when someone catches a fish. No. I'm absolutely overjoyed for them because I know what it means to me. So, if someone catches it, whether they pub chuck it or they do it with great skill and dedication, then they've caught that fish and you can't take that away from them. So fair play to him. So it always makes me think, like you get your school report and it says must try harder, written in red. That's what it does to me. So so that was the 2021-22 season over with. The only thing of note that the October, I didn't because I had 6 weeks off. I didn't really get to Grenville last year. I went down. The only fish I went down a couple of times. I went once in September, a couple of times, once in October, and a couple of times in November. But in October, I had a 34.10 common, which was like a few ounces under my PB, and I've had 2 fish. I've had 2 commons out of Grenville at 34.10 and 34.12. My sort of aim is to get a 40 out. There's about 7 40-pound commons in there now. Out of about 1,800 fish I'm average, so there's not many in. But I would just love to get one of the Grenville commons. But it wasn't to be, because when I saw that pop up, basically what happened was I was in a swim which is in a little bay. I was fishing at 96 yards. And I seen some bubbling sort of about 40 yards out. There's a really deep hole close in this swim. I didn't know whether it was the bottom, just because it's a big gravel pit. I didn't know whether it was just the bottom gassing up or there were actually fish there. So it was looking dead anyway. So I just whacked a solid bag on. Sort of thought, just pub chucked it to these bubbles and then catapulted. Basically, I catapulted me nut. I made some nut mix, some high-fat nut mix for the summer, and then because for Acton, and then I ended up not being able to fish. So I had a reasonable quantity of this nut mix still in the freezer, and one of them was in a bucket, in the sort of in liquid. So they were quite soggy and quite soft. But anyway, they catapulted out 40 yards, and then within a couple of hours, and absolutely smoked off. The tip just went bang because I was literally fishing in 26 foot of water at 40 yards. So your line's going straight down off the rod tip. Yeah. The rod tip just went bang down. And it was a lovely 34.10 common, absolutely pristine. That was it for Grenville for basically that season. I had that and a couple of small ones.
Don't see many people using a catapult these days, do you?
Well, Grenville's super long range. Apart from like sort of late spring, early summer, sometimes they come close in. But I spot everything. I haven't used a catapult since 2016, really. When I came up with the theory about, when I mentioned last time when I bet tight baiting on Acton to get the big uns before they put the stockies in. Basically, from the start of 2017, I started spotting, even just boiling. So I haven't used it. All my catapult elastics were all knackered. It was like an old man's underpants, and it was just, look, it was only 40 yards. But then that just ripped off within a couple of hours, and then that was a lovely bar of gold. But I mean, the lads on Grenville, some of them are just absolute animals. They can chuck like 140, 150, 160, 170, some of them. They're just animals. I can't do it. So
no,
it's an art form in itself.
It is, mate. Yeah, it is.
Fair play to them. I mean, Terry Edmonds is on there this season, so you know what I mean?
Yeah,
an absolute beast. So that was sort of up to sort of summer 2022. This summer. Anyway, went back to the first trip. Acton opened on the Monday. There was the draw. I think it was about 11 or 12 there on the draw. I couldn't get down for the draw, so I ended up going on the Sunday at the end of the opening week. Anyway, they hadn't spawned again. So I thought, right, I'm going in pot beds for the drop tail, because if it hasn't spawned, there's a chance it'll be £40. 39, £40. So I thought, sweet, I'm going in pot beds. If it was free, all the way down, I think I'm going in pot beds. Anyway, it turns out pot beds is free. Drops in pot beds, think, I'm going to do my best to get the big common. And then what happens? On my banker spot, I get a take. Does absolutely fuck all. Nothing happens. Get in the water to net it. But pops his lips again. I thought, it's a big lever again. Nets it. It is a big lever. And it was 41.6. So I got me £40 lever. I've only been in that swim twice in 2022, and both trips I've had the big lever out.
Which fish is this? What's it called?
The big lever.
Just called the big lever. Okay.
Yeah, and I had it in the spring at 38.7, and it never comes out of pot beds. And then the second time I go in pot beds at the start of the season, I have it again, but I had it at 41.6, so I had my £40.
Yeah, I had your 40.
The only thing what took the polish off catching it at 38.7 was, one, it should have been bigger, so I was concerned because when the big fish start dropping, then it's not a good sign.
Yeah.
And secondly, I thought that's my only chance of a true £40 English leather. So it was like, it could have been a bit bigger, but I was overjoyed to catch it because I've never seen it on the bank, and I just really wanted it. It's just to me, it's a mega fish. So to catch it again over 40, I was just absolutely overjoyed. I know repeats aren't the one, but I don't mind when it's a fish you want so badly.
Is it a true leather with the less?
It's not a nude leather, but it's a true leather. It's got a couple of tiny marks on the wrist of its tail.
How many did you count the rays on the anal fin?
No, but it's definitely a leather.
Right. That's the way to tell. I don't know if you know.
Yeah. I remember Simon Scott going through it in detail. But it hasn't got any scales and it's completely nude, apart from there's a couple of lines on the wrist of its tail.
Yeah.
But it's just a mega fish, massive bump on its head. Huge, a gob you could get an orange in. It's just a lovely fish. So that was great. Went back the week after and went into First Bay because Terry had the Ryans at a First Bay. Basically, I was concentrating on 4 swims because I only had 4 fish left now I wanted to catch in 22. The drop tail and the sergeant, and they both, they come from all over the lake. And then you've got the Lucan, which doesn't come out often and comes out the top end of the lake, and Ryan's basically comes at the top end of the lake in 4 swims. So I was concentrating on First Bay, Oak, Conquer and African. So I was thinking, if I can get in any of those 4 swims, I'm just going to fish them no matter what this season. So the second trip, I went in First Bay. I had a stocky, and then I was seeing fish show to my left. So I had a good lead about and found a lovely little spot to my left. And it just felt nice. So I put quite a decent hit of bait on it, some boiling, some maize. We'll talk about the maize as well. Remember we had a conversation, I said I wanted to have a bacterially dominated maize ferment. You probably won't remember that because your memory's garbage, innit? Do you remember we had a messenger conversation about fermented particles?
Yeah. Sorry, mate. I was listening in. I was just off mic because I just went and grabbed a beer.
No, it's cool. We had a conversation on Messenger about fermented particles.
We did.
And I was what I was trying to achieve with maize is a bacterially dominated ferment, because I used to do a lot of high alcohol, actually fermenting particles with yeast and maltose or sugar or molasses or whatever. Yeah. But I wanted to basically get a bacterially dominated one and see what the difference was. But I think you remember the discussion we said, basically grains, if you do a natural ferment, then grains there's yeast and bacteria in the air. So when you do a natural ferment, you tend to get one or the other on carbohydrate particles, like maize and pigeon condition and what have you.
One being dominant, you mean?
Well, basically, carbohydrate particles like maize and wheat and barley will tend to select to some extent for yeast because that's the substrate. They'll also bacteria will obviously act on them as well. But if you get enough alcohol off the yeast, it'll kill the bacteria.
Yeah.
So what I was trying to so basically, when people ferment maize, for instance, they either describe the smell as either boozy or cheesy. If you get a boozy smell, then obviously alcohols and yeast as dominated. If you get a cheesy smell, then that tends to suggest you've had a bacterial ferment. So what I wanted to try and get the bacterial ferment. Anyway, for one batch, I managed to get it. I managed to get I put some lactobacillus in it, and it went really milky. And it just looked right. You know, I'd had it sort of 12 months. And I'd also put some, I had a bacterially dominated ferment on some hemp. So I took some of the juice out of that, basically inoculated the maize with it to try and use it as a starter. And I left that sort of 12 months, and then it just looked, when I pulled the crusty lid off it, it just looked really, really carpy and good. Anyway, my point of telling you that is, I found this new spot, and I gave it a decent hit of the golden balls boilies, but a decent hit of this maize. And literally within 2 hours of leading about and spodding, which normally kills it for a good 6 to 12 hours, it absolutely smoked off in the afternoon, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Got beaten up by a fish, and it was a fish called a peach at 42.5. Absolutely mega fish. I mean, I have had it before. I've had it before, but it's just a mega fish. And I thought, well, that's obviously a good spot. So that was a mega trip, but it was also validated. I mean, it's only happened once, but it seemed a validation for the fermented maize as well. Yeah, I had 25 litres of it as well, so I was thinking, we'll give this a bash, see what happened. So then I went back in that swim the week after and had a couple of stockies. And then week after that, the 26th of June, I had a fish. There's a little mad common called Finny the Common. It's got an enormous tail, but it gets braced with the biggest fish in the lake, the slope. The first time I had the slope, I braced it with Finny. So I was thinking, and then I had another fish, a 29 original male, and I've braced that with the slope as well. So I thought, I don't actually necessarily want to catch the slope, but I thought this trip I've had 2 fish I've braced with the slope before. I thought I'm having the slope here. The slope's about anyway. Nothing happened, so that was incorrect. But yeah, so that was end of June, and then where are we up to now? And then just July and August was just garbage, absolute garbage. Super high temperatures, the heat wave at like 40 degrees. I did 12 nights, 6 trips. That's 12 nights, and I had 2 stockists for my trouble and a tench. It was just, honestly, it was just painful. It was sweating your knackers off. They were just sat in the weed, just shite. But you just got to keep going because you never know.
Got to keep going, mate. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love being at Acton anyway. It's just a beautiful place. But it was just insane. Plus doing the carnivore, so you're smashing sort of getting on for a kilo of meat a day. So
yeah, I want to come on to that in a bit actually, because yeah, that's a bit of a thing in itself, isn't it? Cooking on the back. Yeah. Just to go back, I think you sent me a picture of the peach, or I saw it somewhere. It kind of looks like all the other fish in there.
You're a Philistine.
This soulless leather-looking thing. Anyway, and I'm only joking, mate. So you caught that on the fermented particles, right?
And the golden, the Grenville's golden balls as well.
In the Grenville golden balls, yeah.
Yeah.
What's your reason for wanting the microbial, the bacterial fermentation on your particles?
Organic acids,
which are what acetic acid?
Well, you're probably getting when you get a yeast ferment. Basically, what all you're really doing is alcohol. I mean, yeast have certain. I think they have certain proteases in them as well, but predominantly you're looking at alcohol. You're taking some of the starch out of it, turning it into sugar. It's going soft, and alcohol is hugely soluble. And I'm not sure if it's attractive in itself. I mean, Mark Holmes is convinced it is. And many years ago, I asked him, I said, do you think they have a receptor for alcohol? And he said, I don't know, but it works. And I've done well with alcohol. I used to use the juice with enzymes and citric and ascorbic in it on a yeast ferment, and I did well on it. You just using it as a boilie soak and also as the particle as well. Like when I was on Nipton, I was basically post baiting. I found a swim where no one wanted to fish, and I was putting 90 litres of particle in when I was leaving just to clear the spots in the weed. But it was all yeast. It was all yeast fermented high alcohol particles, wheat, barley, pigeon conditioner. Just the ducks ate half of it, but it was keeping my spots clean. But I always wanted to try. I've heard like people like Frank Warwick talk about the maize going cheesy, and I've also read that part of the attraction in CSL is lactic acid.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
what I was aiming for with maize is basically the cell membranes in the maize will form your smelly. If you can get a yeast, a bacterial ferment, some of it potentially could turn into your caproics, your acetics, your caproics, your butyrics, your isovalerics. There's some fat in, not very much fat, but there's some fat in it. But I was hoping to also get a bit of a lactic acid fermentation as well.
Yeah.
Just from what I've read about the reason CSL works. So I suspect it might be a mixture of lactic acid and the others. But it's certainly different. It's certainly different from an alcohol ferment, and it's got a lovely.
You're gonna get alcohol, the ethanol in it, aren't you? That's gonna be a byproduct as well. Even if it's mostly working off of bacteria, surely you're gonna get alcohol in there as well.
Yeah, to some extent, but it didn't smell boozy but it also didn't smell cheesy.
Did it smell like vinegary or?
not really vinegary.
Because 12 months, I've fermentation. I'm not too clued up on it. It's not something I've done that much of. I've turned tigers, obviously, but I've not looked into the science behind it. But 12 months sounds like a fucking long fermentation period.
Well,
So I'm just trying to
I didn't do that on purpose. I basically made 50 liters,
right.
And the year before, and I didn't fish over the summer. Because I missed the 6 weeks, everything I did, I made a load of nut bakes for the hot weather because of the high fat, and I didn't use any of it.
Okay.
But because the maize was covered in fluid, you get a crust on the top, but underneath is absolutely perfect. Because what happens is any fungal spores float on it, and also if you've got lactobacillus in it, lactobacillus basically stop putrefaction. They're very good for outcompeting other bacteria. So, yeah. And also lactic acid in itself is a preservative if you get a decent level in it. So it was just fine. So 12 months later, I still had a full barrel left. So I thought I'd give it a whirl and things to catch.
Yeah.
Also, with the theory that maize is bright yellow, so it's going to help with these potentially sight-feeding male fish. Also, I know Ryan's has been out in the past over a lad called Sue the Taxi had it. The first picture I ever saw of it, a lad called Sue the Taxi had it over a massive hit of maize. He was the first person on Acton to whack, and not everybody was just fishing boilie. When just the originals were in, and he went in with we used to be able to do a week on there in the season. You could pick a week and do a week, and he basically went in with about 60 kilo of maize, just spotted it in for all day, and then just sat on it for 3 days, and he had an epic hit because no one had ever done it before. But I wanted to, and he had Ryan's back when it was just over 40. He had it, I think, £40 or something. An old fish, but he got a beautiful picture of it. And I thought, that was in the back of my mind that it's been caught over a big hit of maize. So with the sight feeding with the golden balls and put some maize in as well. But just fishing for a bite, not a massive hit, just trying to nick a bite each time. I thought that was potentially the way to go. Anyway, it caught the peach. It's still not caught Ryan's, but there you go.
So sorry to interrupt there. Just to sort of rewind a little bit. So you're obviously going down this route of fermentation for the organic acids. Yeah. Have you straight bought lactic acid, acetic acid, those kind of byproducts, the organic acids? Have you just bought them in their raw state and tried to use them like that, or not?
No. But I've used the season. Well, I remember on the first podcast in spring 2019, I caught over. I made some pop-ups of some food-based pop-ups, and I soaked them in a mixture of apple cider vinegar and red wine vinegar, and I had a mid-30 on those. Basically, as I think I mentioned last time, that apple cider vinegar's got malic and acetic, and grape, red wine vinegar has got tartaric and acetic in it. So in those pop-ups, I had a mixture of malic, tartaric and acetic. And I never I caught a fish on it, and I've never pursued it further, but I think there was definitely some mileage there.
Yeah.
Because if you remember the organic acid list potential bitterling I sent you, and then resent you because you forgot about it.
Say that again.
You remember the Capsunion table, the Capsunion dubbing table I sent to you on Messenger after when you had the podcast with Dino and you were talking about ascorbate?
Yeah.
And I said, "Do you not remember that?" And you went, "No."
You didn't send me a table the other day, though. You just told me off.
I sent you a photograph of a table on Messenger.
When? What, the other day?
Yeah.
No, you didn't.
I did.
No. What?
I've just
Oh,
looked
yeah,
at
you
it.
did. No, you did. Sorry. You did. I'm
Your
awful.
memory, mate.
Fucking hell, mate. Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did.
But on that list is ascorbic acid
Yeah.
from one of the Catsonian and Dovin papers.
Yeah.
But it's for tench and bitterling. But
Mm.
for tench, citric, malic, and tartaric have the same attraction for tench because they didn't do it on carp, but they've got the exact same palatability index for tench. So I'm presuming it's similar-ish for carp. So, you know,
Yeah.
we could talk about that. Also, ascorbic is on that list.
Yeah.
Now,
I mean, there's a lot on that list that have been written about in carpy circles before, isn't there?
No, but the thing I took away from it though is basically when you did Jay's podcast, he said ascorbic acid is definitely attractive, loves it, and then you had Dean on, and Dean said, "Well, it's nutritional, but I don't know anything about it in terms of chemoreception."
But but on the recent podcast with Dean, he said he's never seen it written that it's actually attractive to carp, right?
Yeah,
which is true because this is for bitterling.
This is for tench and bitterling, yeah.
Yeah.
But my theory is that it acts on the same receptor. I think, and I've absolutely no proof of it, but this is my pet theory, and I'd love someone to either prove or disprove it or show us where we're going. I think all the same organic acids, all the carboxylic acids act on the same receptor.
So the bitterling and tench, which obviously, well, presumably they possess this receptor.
Yeah.
Do you know if that same receptor is present in carp? Have you looked?
No, I've not. I don't know anything about it. But my point is right. There's all these there's all these carboxylic acids, and they all have an extremely high palatability to cyprinids, especially carp. Now, say on that list there's about 20 organic acids. I'm not convinced that a carp has 20 different receptors for each organic acid, for each carboxylic acid. Yes. I can't see that because they all have a different affinity, because they've all got a different, what they call a palatability index. And the way they do that is they make little pellets, neutral pellets, and put the organic acid in at a certain level and count how many they pick up and how many they spit out and how long it's in the mouth for. Now, there's a thing in biology called binding affinity. You probably know because you've done a lot of this. No, I think the carboxylic acids, the different specificity of how attractive they are to carp is also to do with the molecular shape of the carboxyl groups and its binding affinity on a receptor. So that makes me think there's only one receptor for carboxylic acids. I can't see them having 20 different receptors, all different. I just can't see it for something what's very similar molecularly. But I also think ascorbic acid acts on the same receptor. I've absolutely no proof of this at all, and Dean's probably the man to delve into it because that's what he does. So message to Dean, crack on, lad. You're scientific, mate. Crack on with that. That's my theory. And I don't know how accurate it is. But I definitely, but the old carp seem to love the carboxylic acids, and that's why I was wanting to get lactic acid in. This takes us back to milk protein. It does to me. I'm not into milk proteins other than for functional purposes. I use whey gel to basically get a hard bind. I don't use casein, I don't use any of that, but I'm quite a fan of skimmed milk. In certain recipes in a bird food. But one of the reasons I think it's got mileage is because it's got a lot of lactose in it.
It's got lactomorphins as well, isn't it? I know Dean goes on about casomorphins, but I believe it's got lactomorphins present. Well, I know it's got lactomorphins present.
I don't know any. I mean, what are lactomorphins? Is that from the whey?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so
like
your casein. Yeah, exactly. Or just whey protein has got it. Hydrolyzed whey protein.
I mean, lactalbumin's part of the whey complex, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, you can't get proper lactalbumin anymore. Obviously, we can, but it's, you're looking at thousands of pounds
Silly
for
money, yeah.
fucking a very small amount. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
But from the point of view, the reason I'm not into milk proteins is I don't, I can't pre-bake, and from what people say, well, two things. One, you've got a pre-bake. I don't think there's much inherent attraction in a globular protein, what has been boiled, because it locks up. It's not soluble because it locks up because you denatured it. That's not to say the protein as a food source isn't valuable, but it has no inherent attraction in my eyes compared to a fish meal as a protein source. Fish meal is not just a protein source. As Dean said, it's a fibrous protein, but it's everything else what comes with it, like 5-IMP,
nucleotides, yeah.
Yeah, it's got everything in it. Milk proteins don't have anything; they're just a protein source.
Have you fed? Just sorry to interrupt. Have you just fed, say, rennet casein, pure on its own, bit of water, pasted up, sort of thing, to fish?
No. The problem is I've never been able to see fish feed on my bait. I've never fished a water where you can watch fish, so I can only go off what I catch.
I mean, if you just paste up different milks, calcium caseinate, rennet, they have a profound effect on fish. In fact, there's even what was it, a paper or was it a book? Fuck, my memory is failing me. I'm sure some people listening, it's a well-known thing. I think it was a study or something like that. Basically fed tank common carp rennet casein, or it might have been acid casein. I can't remember. One of those two. This is going back many years, and yeah, just the
tank fish,
off the scale for it. Sorry,
the tank fish.
Tank fish, yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't set much store by tank fish.
I agree.
I haven't got any in the tank, and I've never watched fish feed on bait, so I can't. I can only go off my catch results.
Yeah, but I mean, to play devil's advocate, a moment ago you were saying you can't understand how that globular piece of food stuff would be attractive.
But you're not boiling it up. You're putting it in raw state.
Very true.
It's not denatured.
No,
if you put it in a boil, if you put it in a boil, it's denatured. That's the difference. And you're binding it with egg.
But I mean, everything in a boilie is denatured to some degree.
Exactly.
But in the other respect, a lot of things are actually better once they have been heated. It's not always a bad thing. I mean,
no, I'm not disputing that for most things, but I'm disputing it with globular proteins, because your globular proteins tend to seal a bait to some extent. I mean, when the lads in the homemade bait group were talking about milks, especially like people like Steve Robbo, he said they didn't usually start catching until the third day.
I think so. I'm a fan of milk proteins. I really am. But I think, and this is a big but, I think you have to, I'm not trying to give it the big one here, but I think you have to know how to use them, and you have to put them. They have to coincide with things that make them very easily to be broken down by carp and utilized by carp.
Yeah.
I think that is the fucking key. So, as I spoke about on the last podcast, been working on a milk bait for the last couple of years on and off. And I think if you can get that carp to utilize those milks, we're not going to say it's the holy grail because it isn't, but it's you're getting closer to it. I think the difference can be night and day. I really do.
Well, NutriBase put the additives in them, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, even going back along, and again, like, sorry, we both of us keep referencing the last podcast with Dean, but he mentioned Jeff's old mix. That was just pure milk protein, which I don't think is the way, pun not intended, because it's not that digestible. But the results that the guys had on that, the 1066 mix, that was just profound. And that was literally just milk proteins with some eggs.
Were they pre-baiting?
No, they were just catching like fucking crazy wherever they went on it. As far as I'm aware, it was written. There was I I think he even wrote about it more recent times in Subsurface Journal. I don't know if
No,
you've.
I've not really. I've seen bits of it.
I'll send it to you.
Yeah,
It's. I mean, I like Jeff Bowers. I like the little bits and bobs. He's not done much, but the bits and bobs he has done it very good. I mean that caught well. I mean, it's literally just eggs and milk powders. I
right.
can't remember if he used a liquid in it or not. He might have, but I mean, the milks are doing something. They definitely are. There's no shadow of a doubt in my mind. But of course, you can make that so much more effective if you know what to coincide it with to get the most out of it.
Hmm. Because the thing I was thinking about when people like Steve Robbo was saying the third day, I was thinking that that's when the late bacteria are hydrolyzing it.
Yeah.
If he's using an out and out milk protein bait, then and a few of the lads swore blind. They didn't work till the third day. Well, I thought, well, yeah, because it's been in the pond for 3 days, and,
But
and
I'm not sure on the extent of his knowledge.
mm,
Would he be rolling it how it should have been rolled? I
I've
don't know.
not a clue. I've not a clue because that was just what he said, and my reaction to that was, yeah, because it's getting hydrolyzed.
Mm.
Another lad who I fished with said he wanted to get some milk protein baits going. So like called Tony, who was probably the best angler who's ever walked on Acton. Because he said back in the day he fished a winter session in I think January years and years ago, and they turned up and his mate had forgotten his bait, and he basically had 5 rotten, sort of mouldy milk protein baits in his bag, like marbles, and he basically cast them out. And they had the best winter session. Well, this kid had the best winter session ever on milk protein singles.
Mm.
And he reckoned that was because they were turned, which again is to getting hydrolyzed.
Yeah. I mean, and this is the beauty of these modern hydrolyzed caseins and whey proteins. Obviously, that job is already done up front.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm utilizing alongside the older fashioned milks as well, because I still think, and again, as I said before, I'm not going to give the game away, but there's definitely things you can add, which
Without a doubt.
there's lots you can do with
yeah.
them.
But I because I was thinking about the hydrolyzed milks, thinking that it's aspartic acid, because in your milk proteins you've got quite a high level of aspartic acid.
Yeah.
So if it was hydrolyzed or it was getting turned by bacteria, then maybe you're getting some free aspartic acid, and that's maybe for the attraction of the hydrolyzed milks. That was my theory. My theory was if I wanted to potentially go down looking at hydrolyzed milks as an attractor because of the aspartic acid content.
Yeah, I mean they're high in branch chain aminos as well, which is obviously.
Yeah. Well, Dean mentioned that in a couple of podcasts ago, didn't he, about branch chains?
Yeah.
So have you ever used hydrolyzed collagen then?
No, I haven't. No.
They're quite high in branch chains, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and again, like going back to it, you can buy BCAA branch chain amino acid powder. You can buy it in its raw form. You can buy essential amino acid powder. You can buy singular amino acids.
Sure.
You can add all of this stuff in individually if you need to.
And have you tried that?
No, I haven't.
Right.
Oh well, no, I not in a finished bait, not with my milk bait. No, I haven't. But I've tested individual amino acids on my carp, and yeah, generally it's not the way to go. But again, you're literally feeding one amino acid in by default because it has to be this way because the way you feed it's in very high concentrations.
Yeah.
I wouldn't hold any stock in that anyway because
in a fixed volume of water.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And you're going to presumably you want to find out what's good to use it in a bait which is comprised of many different ingredients and different amino acids. It's going to behave totally different. So I wouldn't hold much stock in that. Like, if I got hold of Valine, for example, and then fed it and had a really good response off of it. Well, so what? That's going to behave completely different when it's in a bait with a whole multitude of other amino acids. I just wouldn't hold much stock in it.
Put it in a solid bag, though.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yes, if you're gonna, and again goes back to what you were saying about your slop. Yeah, get a load of it. And there's, I mean, solid bag fishing. I've not done that much of it, but my head keeps going back there because there's lots you can get away with. You know, you can feed singular amino acids, you could feed organic acids, you could do whatever you want, really, can't you? And get attraction in the local area and just have your feed bait there. So, or your hook bait there,
Yeah.
I
Well,
should say.
I've done well on Grenville on solids.
What you meant, I think, again, my memory is shaky at best, but I think on the last podcast you mentioned
Yeah.
doing some solid bag work. What do you typically do?
Well, it's the golden balls mix, but really turned, really turned.
Right, and
It's sticky, nasty.
that's like a carbohydrate mix with pre-digested and turmeric. Is that right?
Yeah, but basically it's a site mix where I've took the fish meal recipe and taken the fish meal out of it, replaced it with maize protein. It's 23% hydrolyzed as well. Just put some the only sort of there's no liquid food as such, just Pelican in it. But it seems to turn really well. When you sweat it up, things with maize in them seem to ferment well. And when it goes white and sticky, it starts stinking a bit. But in a solid bag, it seems to do the damage. Really does.
Yeah. Then
And
you just
obviously,
you using the whole bait, so you crumbing them up?
well, no, I put them in the crusher, but I make sure there's some nuggets in it and then some powder. So even if there's some solid food there, but only sort of crushed up nuggets, but there's some solid food there and there's some crumb as well. But that really does. I mean, I had my UKPB on that over bait, but it's still in the bag. And then in 2018, I had a brace of 40s on literally just two bags.
Yeah.
In 72 acres, two bags out, two fish that morning, both 40s. In 72 acres, so powerful. But I also think if you're putting something else in the stock, whatever you put, because Grenville's boilie only, so you can't be putting stuff in.
You can't use particle.
No, it's boilie only.
Jeez, really?
Yeah. But I had my first UK 40 off Nipton on a solid bag. I was fishing a spot on Nipton in 2015, and it was about 4.5 foot deep, and it was just out of swan depth. Well, there were coots all over the spot, and bite time in that swim was like 3:30 in the morning. So you cast out at sort of 8 o'clock, just before dark in the spring. But then if you didn't get a bite it's coming light at 3:30, 4 o'clock, the coots were straight on the spot, the swans were over it. So this spot, I thought that spot has got to do fish. It just looked perfect. Went over it in the boat, just looked beautiful. Pulled the marker back, so I found 4.5 foot, so it was out of swan depth. And I thought, yeah, that spot's got mileage. But I couldn't bait it up. I was filling it in. That was the spot I was putting 90 litres of particle in every week when I was leaving. But actually fishing it, I couldn't put any free bait in. So I thought, right, well, solid bags is the way to go. And I remember reading one of the BCSG annuals, one of the books, and there was a guy, I'm sure it was John Carver, and he was saying that he'd never seen a response on pellets like these spirulina and betaine pellets. So I got some, and I was dosing them up with Nampla. So while I was sat there when I was fishing, I had an ice cream container, and I was putting the pellets in. I was leathering the Nampla over them, and then drying them out in the sun, and then doing the same thing and drying them out. So I had them super concentrated with Nampla on these spirulina and betaine pellets, because I didn't want to just fish a single. I wanted just some food there, however small it is. Anyway, so just fishing a bag on the spot, and then no free bait, and then baiting up when I left, but the ducks were eating most of it. But I had, within 3 months, I had the late record out. the first 40 I ever did out of Nipton on a solid.
Which just because I know we're going to get loads of questions about this, messages in. Which brand of betaine and spirulina pellets were you?
They were Coppens.
Coppens.
Coppens. I'm not sure if they still make them because this was 7 years ago.
Yeah.
But it was a Coppens spirulina and betaine. I got a mix of 2 mil, 4 mil, and 6 mil. But the reason it sprung to mind was between casting out and bite time, you had 7.5 hours. And all other pellets tend to break down and then there's nothing left within 7 hours, a lot of pellets. But these had a 20-hour breakdown time. And that's what attracted me to them. So I thought, I've got a 20-hour breakdown time, so they're going to last the full length of till a recast. Because Nipton never did a bite after 10 o'clock ever.
Do you ever use certain powders and liquids that can penetrate into the lake bed for a prolonged retraction?
Well, no, not because I don't want to, but I did that on Nipton. And then when I left Nipton, I went on to Acton, and Acton just wasn't suited to solid bags because you're feeling for drops. It's shallow, there's siltweed everywhere. So you were it was out and out boilie fishing. There was a lot of rudd. So I've not used solid bags on Acton, and then on Grenville it's boilie only.
Can you use a boat on there?
On where?
On Acton.
No. It's all casting from the bank.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So you need to feel a drop because it's silty and weedy.
But you can use a boat on Grenville, right?
No. It's mega distance casting.
You can't use a boat on either. Okay. All right.
No. It's only Nipton. On Nipton, you had to cast your rigs, but you could bait up, feature find, land carp because it was mega weedy as well. You need to go out in the boat and land a lot of them.
Yeah.
But it was also good to go and check your spot. You could go and check your spots in the rowing boat. So it was great for that. But no, I've never done that. But that's not to say I wouldn't do it if the situation arose. I would. There's all sorts of things. I've got loads of game plans in my head which have never come to fruition just because the situation hasn't arisen.
Where are you? Going off topic again? Where are you? You've obviously been on Acton for a long time, and that's like
seventh season. Yeah.
Yeah. Where are you going up once you've caught your last 4 or 2 or whatever you decide upon? Where are you going after that?
Well, I've got a Girton ticket.
Oh, where? Sorry,
Girton in Nottinghamshire.
Right.
Currently got the UK's biggest common in it. I've got a ticket for there, but there's a lot of stockies coming through. But I've just got the ticket as a sort of spare as a spare ticket, because when you want a ticket on there, it's going to be gold dust. The only reason I've not fished it as much is because the Acton fish are so old. I just want to catch them before they go.
Yeah.
So it's like a ticking time bomb. So it's just a question of, yes, I want to try other places. And my Grenville ticket, I've had my Grenville ticket. It'll be the start of my 5th season, and I've hardly fished it. Which is arguably got the best stock of fish in the country. But it's a 350-mile round trip for 2 nights, and his fish are just getting better and better. His scaly stock is what are coming through now. I just utter carp on.
They're all quite young fish, though, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. I think the oldest are the original stockings, but he's naturally collected the spawn and the stuff what's coming through. I mean, the picture on the scaly one off the first podcast picture, which wasn't white tips.
The second.
The second one. That's a 30. That was a 33 pounder in 2020, so 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's one of his naturally born. He's collected the spawn at the lake, put it in a rearing pond, and that's what's turned out.
Yeah.
Potentially that could be 40 that fish now.
Do you ever fancy going the other way and go into? There's not that many around these days, but like a largely unfished pit with carp that have just been left to their own devices, that just very old, very, very different. Do you ever get sort of tempted with that type of fishing or not?
The problem is, I live in Bolton, and there isn't a lot about. The only there's not much decent carp fishing up here, and what is here is well known about and gets absolutely hammered. So that's why I travel. I haven't fished in the northwest for since 2010. I went to Selby, which was 78 miles each way. Then I went down to Nipton, which was 135 each way. And then I got my Acton ticket, which is a 200-mile round trip, like 101 each way. And then I've got Girton's 99 each way, and Grenville's 175 each way. So,
how far from Yorkshire are you?
Well, Selby was in Yorkshire. I'm sort of 80 miles from Yorkshire.
Right.
So Selby was 78 miles each way. So, you know, I don't hear about places. I think wild untapped places you really need to bait them up and walk them.
Yeah.
And I don't have that luxury. I do me 2 nights a week. I go there. And it was what you were saying to Dean on the last podcast. All my bait, I've never pre-baited any of my baits. The only baiting I've ever done was on Nipton when I was filling it in with particle, but that wasn't as a food feeding exercise, more as keeping the spots clean of weed. And half of that bait would have been eaten by the ducks anyway. But when you were talking about Jake, like the complete opposite of how he goes about. He walks these lakes, he's baiting them up, and then he's in and out, and he's caught the fish.
Who's that? Sorry,
you remember Jake the Heron?
Oh, Jake the Heron. Yeah.
He's literally walking these lakes.
Yeah.
Sneaking about, wanging a bit of bait in, and it couldn't be any further from how I fish.
How far?
I'm not saying but where he's living down there's a lot of these waters about.
How far from the? Yeah, go on. Sorry, mate. Go on.
No, I'm just saying it's just the area you live in. You know, I don't know what sort of distance he's travelling, but there's a lot down south. You've got a lot of club waters with some really nice fishing. There might be 1 or 2 in that lake, but there's still. And then you've got a lot of gravel pits down there, which some of them are, they're guesting, aren't they? They're sneaking about. But we just don't have gravel pits up here.
No, I know, mate. I know. Well, I lived in Cornwall for years. Sort of same scenario. Long way from where you want to be fishing. How far from the Lake District are you, though?
It's about an hour and a half each way, depending whereabouts it is.
Yeah, it's a fair way, isn't it?
And the M6 is, Jesus, the M6 can be absolute carnage.
Yeah.
When you get to sort of Preston, it can just be, I mean, Jesus, this summer when, people haven't been away and what have you, it was tailing back. It was half an hour to an hour just to get to Preston.
So you're north of Manchester, right?
I'm northwest Manchester, yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So, in Manchester, you basically what they call, you've got Clifton, which they call, like in the mag, they call MPL, Manchester Park Lake. But it's just, it's just savage. I went down to see my nephew on a bank holiday, and there must have been 3,000 people in the park and about 1,000 dogs. And that's just not me. I love going on a nice, quiet syndicate. You can leave your gear, go to the shop if you want to, or go for a walk around the lake, go and talking to people, and your gear's still there when you come back.
Yeah.
I fished these sort of park lakes and dumps when, sort of the 70s and 80s when I was a kid. Not for carp, but for tension, what have you, pike and all that. And I just don't want to do that anymore. I just want to go to a lake where there's no hassle. It's absolutely beautiful. It's quiet. And there's some nice fish. But we just don't get the opportunity. I mean, certainly in the Midlands, like Nottinghamshire, the Trent Pits, loads of those are nature reserves, and there's people sneaking about on them, aren't there? With fish washed in off the Trent, and some really special fish around there. But they're guesting. They're not there legally.
You're a long session angler, aren't you?
Well, I enjoy the camping.
You're not a quick in and out sort of dude.
No, I wouldn't fish days because I really enjoy divvying up, because when I get to the lake, I mean, people talk about living in the moment, don't they, these days with mental health and all the social media bollocks and what have you. When I turn up to a lake, I am just like in Zen mode. Set my bivvy up, think about the fishing. I just love it. When I get in bed, even in winter, when I fish in winter, I get in bed and I just love getting in bed in my bivvy, even when it's freezing cold, shitty weather. I take all the gear. You know, you'd laugh at how much gear I take, because also potentially I'm fishing 3 different lakes, so I've got to take the stuff. They all need their own equipment, but if I take it out of my kit, chances are I'll forget. And if I'm 175 miles away without the right kit, I'm knackered. So I tend not to even separate all my gear out. So yeah, it's just not sneaking about. Is not how I'm set up for.
No.
No, it's not to say I wouldn't enjoy it, but I just enjoy the camping aspect of it, switching off, sitting there. It's just a complete disconnection from modern life. I think that's why I like Acton so much, because you have no phone signal either. So you know social media. You couldn't be more in the moment.
Yeah.
You know, there's no road traffic. There's no street lights. I mean, even like with Girton, there's a road at the back, so you hear traffic. And with Grenville, you've got the A1 at the back of it, so it's never completely silent. But Acton is just silent.
And you fish Fridays till Wednesday, right?
No. I do 2 nights a week. If I can do it, I'll do Sunday to Tuesday.
Okay.
But I only ever do 2 nights a week. But that's my time. I can't imagine getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, tramping around the lake for a few hours, and then going back.
So it's hard work, mate. Dedication's needed. I'm sure you this past week though, you did Friday till Wednesday, right? I dreamt that.
No,
I got that wrong.
No, I've been doing Sunday to Tuesday for the last 3 weeks.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, forget it then. Yeah, yeah. It's different. It for sure is a different type of fishing. If I went back to doing your style of fishing, I've never quite done it like you, but I used to do. And it is definitely different from what I do now, which is very short sessions. You do have to. You don't have to, but it pays off to change your bait accordingly, depending on what you're doing. That's
absolutely. If I was pre-baiting, if I was walking a lake 4 nights a week and pre-baiting, I would use a completely different baiting strategy to what I'm doing now. My baits have got to be instant, because there's only, like on Acton, everybody's on key bait. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people are on key bait solutions ASM. So to the fish in Acton, it's a natural food, because 60%, 70% of the anglers are using it.
Yeah,
and have been since 2013. So for 9 years, they've seen this one bait which hasn't blown, and I'm up against. But when I joined Acton, a lad called Crofty said, "Well, if you're not on key baits, mate, you're not catching." So I thought, challenge accepted.
Yeah.
But that was the case with most other baits. There's people. Yeah. I thought, oh, crack on then. We'll see how we go on.
I've got the opposite thing now, though. So I don't have time to walk the lake. I can't pre-bait, and I'm on fucking limited time. So it's one thing having limited time, but as you said, if you can walk it regularly, get the bait going in, get some spots going, you're angling when you're not there, so to speak. But
absolutely,
flipping it on its head, now I'm figuring out, okay, well, and this is what I have been doing for the last kind of year, 18 months, is okay, well, how can I pitch my bait towards, I can't pre-bait, I'm there for a very fucking short amount of time, but I really need to make these hours count. And that again is a different ball game altogether.
Absolutely.
And I suppose the people that are into bait and making their own bait, obviously those are the ones that are listening to this podcast. If you're not into bait, I doubt you're still listening now. You want to be paying attention to these things. You know, it's not like you're trying to formulate the best bait and then just use it no matter what. You got to formulate the best bait for your individual circumstance and how you fish and the water that you're fishing. the hours that you have on the bank, it's almost more important than actually the fish that you're fishing for in terms of bait formulation. You have to.
Well, how long does it take you to learn that?
Sorry?
How many years does it take you to come to that conclusion? That
many. Well, listening to that, you'd say, well, not many. It's obvious, isn't it? But for me, it wasn't. No, it took many fucking years. Many years.
I'll tell you, Brian Scholar said to me when I was on Selby in 2011, 2012, he said, there's no ultimate bait. There's only the ultimate bait for that application.
Yeah.
At the time, it didn't really twig because I'd only been making bait like a year or two, and I was still thinking I could come up with the ultimate boilie, which would rip everywhere apart, and I would be able to come up with it. I was convinced that I could find. I was putting everything in at 2%. I was putting like 18 different ingredients in at 2%. You know, put 20 ingredients in a boilie, and it was just I was catching on it, but I didn't know why it was working or why it wasn't, or I didn't have a didgeridoo.
No.
But a lot of things people say to me, I remember what they said, but it doesn't have any relevance at the time. But later it comes, I think, that's what it meant. You know, but that is exactly the art of bait design. Is designing if you're really into your bait and really into your angling, it's designing a bait or an approach. What is optimum for that angling situation?
Yeah, I couldn't agree
more. When you come up with it, it's a game changer, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I want to kind of make this podcast like actionable info, because from your last two episodes, like the amount of people messaging in and asking about hot soaks and different aspects is it like people have questions they want answered. So I want to make this like I want to include some actionable info. But on that topic, it's fucking impossible because you have to be ruled by the water and your own circumstances. It's very hard to advise people. But in that train of thought, just quickly going back to fermenting particles, so we can put a cap on that. Is there, so for the people listening and that you've piqued their interest, they want to ferment some of their own particles, what info or what would you say is a bit of a how to get the most out of it? What's struggling to sum up what I'm trying to say.
I know what you want to
start fermenting their own particles. What do they do? Yeah, how do they start? How do they get the best out of it?
First of all, it depends on what you call a particle. You've basically got two types of particle. You don't have to do anything different, but you've got to appreciate you're getting a different result. You've got high oil particles, which are like hemp and tigers, and then you've got your more grain type particles like maize, pigeon conditioner. The approaches I've done and done very well on is put some, like in maize or pigeon conditioner, whack some molasses in, put some yeast in, put some citric acid, like I'd say a good tablespoon per gallon of water of soak. Don't put the yeast in first, cook it, boil it, let it cool, stick the yeast in, stick an airlock on it or seal the bucket, leave it a week. You've got an high alcohol fermented grain-based particle.
Are you just using brewer's yeast here?
Brewer's yeast, yeah. I use a high alcohol tolerance wine yeast, but brewer's yeast do. Okay. Then you've got the other thing you can do is literally boil it, cool it, stick the lid on it and leave it for a week, 2 weeks. Don't keep going in it. With all ferments, don't keep opening the bucket because you want it to be anaerobic without air. Something about tiger nuts I wanted to mention, but you just reminded me. When I started looking into this diet, I started looking into it because of lectins in food. You know, plant defense proteins.
Yeah.
And then it sort of came up about butyrate in the gut.
Yeah.
and someone was saying tiger nuts, tiger nut flour
Yeah, it does.
is it a good probiotic
Yeah.
because the soluble fiber in tiger nuts promotes butyrate in the human gut,
Yeah.
which made me think. You hear the anecdotes where people say, "Oh, it swam over a single tiger, the carp turned round
Hmm.
and nailed it." I've never seen it myself because I don't really use tigers. I can't have most of my waters. But that made me think: if you are making tigers gloopy, then is that attraction? Because tigers are basically sugar and fat, aren't they? And probiotic fiber. That's all they are.
There's
Is
fibers in there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what
Soluble
I'm
and
saying. That's all they are.
insoluble.
The fat, sugar, and probiotic fiber. So is when you make tigers gloopy, are the bacteria turning the fat? Is the probiotic fiber causing or aiding bacteria to turn the fat in the tiger nuts into organic acids and butyric, etc. That family,
Mm.
and because they've got oil in them, if you're getting small globules of oil coming up in the water column, carrying the butyric and what have you, is that the basis of attraction in tiger nuts?
It's quite possible. Yeah.
That was my thought from that.
You'd need to have it analyzed, very thoroughly analyzed to know exactly what's going on, and then you can hypothesize what the attraction is, can't you? But
Yeah,
I suppose then you do have to come back to a point of, well, it works really well.
yeah.
Do you need to know? I mean, I
Well,
think people like me and you would like to know, but we don't.
I'm a weirdo in that. You probably gathered this from interesting bait, but I tend to need to know the mechanism for a bit of belief in my life generally. I've got a bit of a scientific education, but just generally, I don't tend to believe stuff just from seeing it. I tend to need to know the mechanism in order to be convinced, and it's a blessing and a curse. I mean, I've had a couple of mates in the past who've done Atkins diet, and you know, because I didn't know the mechanism at the time. I was like, yeah, but is it safe? And do you know what I mean? But you can see they've lost weight and they're doing well. But because I don't know the mechanism of it, yeah, I'm just never sure. And it's the same with bait. Once I can work out a sort of the mechanism or the approach, then everything connects, and I'm completely convinced. Some of that is when you're fishing a harder water. I mean, when I started on Acton, it was rock hard. Before you put the stockers in, it was rock hard. The fish was so clued up and so pressured that you could try something and it wouldn't work, but not because it wasn't the best thing you've ever used. It was just such a moody water.
How many fish? How many fish were in there, Stephen?
At the time, the general consensus was somewhere between 60 and 80 originals in sort of 17 acres. So it's not mega low stock, but the problem is you were always, at the time, you were always on the fish. They were showing a lot. You knew where they were. You'd watch them fizz up on your bait, not a beep.
Mm.
They were just masters at getting away with it. And when I said in the first podcast, I reckon that the big ones were single feeders. There was no competition. They were grazing your bait. They'd have a bit, go, come back, have a bit more. And unless they actually made a mistake, you weren't catching them. So it wasn't the water to do any sort of bait testing on, because you were doing blanking so much anyway. You know, like my first season, I probably did 50 odd nights in the season, and I had 15 fish. And that I think I was near the top. I think I was second or third in terms of numbers on my first season.
Mm.
You know, so you're averaging a fish every 3 nights. Or every 72 hours. So every trip and a half, you're averaging 1 fish. But that doesn't give a picture of the blanks you did, because you might have a flurry of fish. You might have a couple of good fish. Like in the spring of those 15 fish, I had 5 originals in 3 weeks in my my first spring. So I only had 10 fish from June through till October, November.
Yeah.
And I had five of those I had in my week. So for the rest of the season, I had five fish. So you're doing an hell of a lot of blanking. So you've got to go in with something you're convinced is work and just keep working it rather than mess about.
Yeah.
So yeah, bait testing is. That's why I need to know. I need to be convinced why it's working, and then I've got confidence to sit out the blanks. Because otherwise, what used to happen on there is lads would come on and they were probably top rod on the club water or the syndicate they've come from, and then they go there and their heads would just fall apart because if it wasn't happening straight away, then they were swapping and changing, and then they don't know why they catch it. And so I think having confidence in your knowledge allows you to not worry about bait and then just try and work everything else out. But I can only do that if I know the mechanism and the science behind it, which is, like I say, is a blessing and a curse. Like I couldn't take a bait off a fern and have 100% confidence in it, even though everybody else is catching on it, because I don't know what's in it.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I struggled to do that as well when I wasn't rolling my own. I totally get that, but it depends on your threshold for. It's all like all science. I don't know. I want to make. I'm trying to think how I can put this. It's quite a deep thing to say, but all science. At some point down the line, it comes down to blind faith to a certain degree.
Absolutely.
It just depends what your threshold for that is. So, fermentation, for example, you could be absolutely fucking convinced that, okay, well, yeah, fermentation, it produces lactic acid, which is dissolved lactic acid. But would it do that a trillion times out of a trillion? In a trillion different scenarios?
No.
The answer is you don't fucking know that. You could hypothesize, well, yes, it should because it's done it this amount of times, but it's never been done a trillion times out of a trillion in a row, is it? I very much doubt. So there's a threshold of it. There's a threshold of belief.
No, absolutely. It's almost like a religion with me that.
Yeah.
I've got. It's a faith-based system. I've made this bait, whichever it is. I have faith in it, therefore I can continue my journey. I don't have faith in someone else's system because I haven't done it. Yeah. So I don't know what's in it. That is, whether I'm right or wrong, whether religions are right or wrong, bait is my religion. And it may or may not be right. But what I get out of it is trying to work out the wheat from the chaff. It's just, and then when it works, it's great because you've caught what you've caught on your thinking, and it's really satisfying. But if I turned up in a lake, say I went to Acton, and Ryan's has been out on key baits, loads of times, I don't know who's been caught on anything else, but I want to catch it on my bait. I wouldn't get any satisfaction from rocking up with a bag of key baits and pulling Ryan's out.
So, sorry, I'm probably going over old ground, but Ryan's is the one that you really want, but your mate keeps catching.
Yeah.
Have I seen a picture of that or not?
Yeah, that's the one I sent you, and you said it's that big leathery thing. What doesn't look? It looks like everything else.
Oh, that ugly slug-looking thing.
Yeah, that big ugly long slug thing.
Ah, that one. Yeah. That soulless thing.
Soulless, horrible fish. But my point is, I wouldn't feel like I've earned that fish if I caught it because everybody else is putting it.
Exactly.
That's not to knock the other anglers on the lake.
No. Yeah, I get it.
It's like my mate Multi, right? Well, the bailiff. A couple of springs ago, he fucking rinsed pot beds. Yeah, the slope, the biggest fish in the lake. He had the Sergeant, which is my second most wanted, and he had a fish called Big Scale at 39. And then he had a bucket of slop, and he said, "Yeah, I'll leave you that." And that's what he caught those 3 fish over.
Yeah, you can't use that. You
And
can't do it.
I said, "No, mate." I said, "Because if I caught one of my targets over that, I'd be gutted." And I said, "It's not. I'm not having a go at you. You've just smashed the lake. You've got the best result that anybody's ever had in the spring. Yeah. But I can't use your concoction."
It's
because I haven't made it.
I'm with you. I agree with you totally. And some people roll their eyes, some people will nod along with this, but it's worse than not catching it at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you have that burning fucking thing like in you if you catch it through those means. And whereas if you just don't catch it, you can kind of live with that a lot easier, I think. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'm guessing. I've never been given a bait and caught a carp, or I don't think I have ever really caught a target not through my own means. I might be wrong on that, but I don't think I have. But I would imagine it's just worse than just not catching it.
I mean, I'm happy to use I don't make fluoro hook baits. I don't use them much, but I don't make them. Basically, when we make Gaza Scent or something, I don't make fluoro hook baits because I don't use them. I can't be asked making 3 different colours on the off chance I'll use them occasionally. It's just not me, because most of my angling doesn't revolve around colours. But I've no objection to taking someone's fluoro hook bait and then doctoring it up. Because that's not... All my angling is about generating a feeding response in whatever manner I think is appropriate to the angling situation. And the satisfaction I get is from putting the appropriate baiting situation and designing, and tweaking it and pissing about to try and get what I want, to achieve what I want. And that is how I enjoy fishing. So some people just think they're mental, don't they? They'll buy a bag of whatever and then go and fish. I'm presuming like people like Jake who's walking lakes, he's buying his bait, whatever he's using maggots or whatever he's using. And to them, it's about tracking the fish down, isn't it? And observing it and sneaking about and doing.
He's quite into bait, actually, but we didn't really talk about it.
Right. Oh, does he make a bit as well?
Yeah, we purposely didn't talk about it, but yeah, he's
right. Well, right.
He's not just chucking in any old shit.
No. I mean, I can tell from what he's saying, but people who like walking lakes, it's just a completely different type of angling, isn't it?
In a way, yeah.
Because if I was approaching that, in that I was pre-baiting spots and then hitting them when I thought I was right, then nutrition would be the cornerstone of the bait I'm putting in. Whereas now it's out and out attraction. Because the fish isn't coming across that bait until it comes across my spot. 2 nights a week. There isn't enough bait going in for that to be, as people getting a bait established, they call it, don't they?
Yeah.
Whereas on other lakes, most lakes are usually dominated by a few baits because you get a good angler catching on a certain brand, and then everybody else tends to jump on the bandwagon, don't they?
Yeah, I mean,
let me just reminded me something. Remind me about John Baker.
Okay, what about him? We'll just say it now.
No, in the last when on John Baker's podcast, he was based. I don't know if you remember this, but he said people send him recipes and all the fish meals. He says he's never seen anything remotely unique or different from everybody's recipe he's ever been sent at the fish meals.
Okay,
but the point that he didn't make is if you take that fish meal, which is the same as every other home roller's fish meal, and put it in a lake, how unique is it? And how much better is it than any commercial bait what's going?
Yeah, I get sent a hell of a lot of mixes. You honestly, you wouldn't believe it. Of recipes. I don't actually get people sending me their baits because obviously I don't give out my address. But a lot of people run their mix by me, and I got to agree with him. They're all fucking much of a muchness. I mean, fish meal around about 30% LT94,
Yeah, exactly.
10% pre-digested, 5% brewers. There's just
they're all the same, aren't they?
They're all the fucking same.
Yeah, right.
But is
if
that?
you take
Yeah,
that
I understand.
recipe and
I know
put
what
it
you're
in
going
a
to
lake,
say. Yeah, I know. Go on.
How much more special is that home roll bait?
Agreed.
Doesn't matter if home roller. How many home rollers are on the average syndicate? Or Park Lake or whatever. One, maybe two, none.
It depends where you go. It depends where you go, doesn't it? And I mean, I've just joined a syndicate which is quite busy by my standards. I usually sort of fuck off where no one else is. But I've just joined a syndicate. You know, I went there today. There was fucking 10 people fishing, and that's just alien to me. I usually I'm on sort of a nature reserve where no one's fishing or something like that. Or at least ideally I am, and it's totally different. But quite a few of those lads, they are rolling their own bait. So there's pockets of it. I understand it's few and far between, but there are pockets of it.
Yeah, from my experience, there aren't though. Like on Acton, I make my own bait. There's another lad who's done well, it's his own recipe. You get someone else to roll it, but it's his own recipe. So effectively, he's like a home roller.
But you've just been on Acton for 7 years. So
yeah, but what I'm saying is you've got probably 50 members a year, and a lot of them are changing. You only do 1 or 2 seasons.
Yeah.
And there's only ever been one home roller on it, me, and, someone else.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. I'm just trying to say that there's maybe pockets of it. Maybe there's other lakes where there's a higher percentage of home rollers. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, but I don't think it's common because...
Oh, it's not common. No.
So what I'm saying, on the average lake, what percentage of... Say you've got 100 anglers fishing. I'll say you've got 50 anglers fishing a lake. How many people would you say are very competent home rollers? I'm not on about people who buy a base next to...
No. I get, very fucking small. Very small amount. Yes.
Who really know what they're doing.
Yeah, totally. I get what you're saying. I do get what you're saying.
If you take a good recipe, which may be exactly the same as everybody else's fish meal to some extent, it is still hugely unique on the lake you're fishing.
I get what you're saying. I'm playing devil's advocate. So there was a lake in Cornwall. Me, a friend, Pete, and 2 other people were fishing it. At one point, there was different people came and went. All 4 of us were rolling our own bait.
Right.
So 100% of the people that were fishing this lake, there was only 4 of us. It's very unusual, but we were all rolling our own bait. So that is very different from 99% of the venues out there. You're absolutely right. Most venues out there, there might be 1 guy rolling his own bait, maybe 2 because they're mates. I get what you're saying. I do get what you're saying.
Well, that was my first thought when he said that. I thought, well, yeah. You're exactly right. A lot of homemade fish meals are, they might have a bit of Robin Red in, or they might have a bit of this and that, but they're all very much of a muchness, aren't they? But they're so different from a commercial bait.
Still very different, yeah.
Yeah. And although, sorry, just to add to that further, definitely, I would imagine very different from your lights of Mainline, and we know the big names, don't we? Yeah.
But what about the smaller outfits, the smaller rollers? Again, just to go back to the last podcast, Dean, he's got a fish meal. I imagine I know a fair bit about that, but I would imagine it's more along the lines of what someone like me or you would roll compared to, say, Mainline.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, look at the volume that Dean's shifting compared to Mainline.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I get that.
If you go on certain lakes, everybody's on a certain bait, and a lot of it's the big companies. Admittedly, if you've got lakes where a smaller company is producing a good bait and it does well, then chances are a lot of people will be on that bait.
So let's go specific then. I think on your last podcast you mentioned you were talking about farriers, or maybe you didn't. Maybe that's something that was spoken about
Oh, it
off
was
air.
something else which shall not be named.
Oh, okay. It was a different. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, farriers. You're familiar with it, aren't you?
I know a lot of fishes that.
You're friends with him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of commons in there. Big fish in there. As far as I'm aware, that gets pretty dominated on mainline cell. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. What would you make of a place like that?
From what my mate does, he uses particle.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of spotting goes on.
I think a lot of people spot on it, but I also think, well, I might be wrong. I think a lot of people use boilie on it, and they're using the cell, and that
Right.
I think, again, I could be wrong. I believe that is the dominant bait. Kind of ties in with your theory. It's a very visual bait. Obviously, before you've spoken about commons, visual baits. Who knows what is in it? I don't know the exact makeup.
Well, they print the ingredients on the bag. So you know what's in it.
Yes. So I'm trying to be very PC here, Stephen.
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe it's not as nutritious as what I would knock up at home, or what you would knock up at home, or what Dean would sell. It's maybe a little bit different from those type of baits, right? But yeah, it is catching fish upon fish upon fish upon fish.
Yeah, because everybody's using it. So
self-fulfilling prophecy. I get
exactly.
that.
If everybody's using it, then also commons are a different beast. I mean, those lads absolutely smashed Grenville to bits, but the shoalfish, it's deep, clear water. They can see it. All mainline baits are bright, and they wash out even brighter. So when you've got a good head of fish, they tend to see patches of bait, and they tend to eat them. And like I said, common's a different beast. But if you go on a lake, like for instance Selby, when I was on Selby, everybody was on key bait, was on Can't Company Ice Red,
yeah,
which is a fish meal.
Yeah,
everybody was on it. And then a lad called Wayne went on with the cell and absolutely cleaned up in the first season. And then a lot of people went on it the season after, and the results dropped off.
Now, just to switch gears a little bit, just to go actually back to what you were saying in the first few minutes of this podcast, your protein fulfillment theory, right? That all animals and potentially carp can be added into this group.
Sure.
They will keep on eating
until they get
their sufficient fill of protein, which really is a certain combination, an amount of amino acids.
Sure.
So maybe that's a bait such as a sow, if indeed it is lower in protein, maybe it's lending itself
to make them eat more. They'd have to eat a lot more. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Which is good for angling, right?
Yes and no.
If it's the predominant feed stuff that's put in the lake, of course.
But what you tend to find is when the fish are having it, they'll eat anything. Also, angling pressure comes into mind. What you tend to find with lower food value baits is when they've been caught on it, they tend not to. If fish what don't like being caught, basically they appreciate when they're exposed to a lower food value bait, they tend to realise it's a lower food value bait, and the danger of getting caught on that bait then makes them a bit moody around that bait.
How do you know they know that though?
Because I've seen lakes where people fish lower food value baits on lakes where they choose it. Like Acton is rich, really rich in bloodworm, natural snails, mega rich lake. And I've seen people come with big commercial bait, firm bait, and they have, especially before the stockies got put in, they caught nothing. They struggled. Different now, they put the stockies in because there's competition for food, so they'll tend to eat more. They're more catchable because there's more competition. But when that competition wasn't there, and you've got highly pressured old fish, they weren't risking getting caught on a low food value bait. So it's all about competition, what's going in. Because the people I've seen people use these big companies baits, and they're honestly big. In the early days, Rob didn't really put a lot of stockies in until November 2018. So I did 3 seasons where there weren't really any stockies in there, and honestly, people struggled. But these are really hard fish.
But then they'll get caught on something like sweet corn or maize, which isn't that high value either.
Yeah, no, but because it was different. When Stu put the maize in the first time, no one had put any maize in. Everybody was using boilie, throwing stick, hinge stiffy. So he put 60 kilo of maize in. There's no danger associated with it. You just put a bright yellow bait in a quantity they haven't seen probably for 10 years or more or whatever, because everybody was just boilie fishing.
How deep was the water?
4 foot.
Jeez. So he's not getting plagued with bird life, I'd imagine.
When you've got that many hook baits, when you've got that many freebies, it doesn't matter. If you've got 60 kilo of maize, how many individual food items have you got?
Yeah.
Also, the bird life's only come back recently, but they weren't. You're at a swan depth in about 4.5 foot, 5 foot maybe.
For me, sorry, I'm taking off on tangents, but for me, you just don't know if a bird has gone down, picked it up, spat it out, and you were there with a bare fucking hook. But
it's just probability, isn't it? If you've got 60 kilo of maize with
I know
60,000 food items,
I get
the probability of you getting picked up is. I mean, we've all got tufty torches now. We didn't then, but it's just a numbers game. You're not getting. Also, there were only 2 coots on the lake then, and the swans, when the water's up, the swans can't reach it. So you were all right then. Recently, the tufties have been not tufties. The coots have been a nightmare, and the water level's down this year, and it's just 3 of the 4 swims I want to fish. You can't fish them because they're in swan depth. You know, you can get rid of the coots with a tufty torch, but you can't. The swans they're just dumb. You just upend and clean you out. You're just going to hook them up. So literally 3 of the 4 swims I want to fish at the moment, I can't fish because the water's just over 2 foot down. So you've got 3 foot now. Three of the best swims on the lake, you've got 3 foot at the moment on Acton. So they're just knackered.
What's the deepest part of Acton?
The dam end's about, on the top lake, you've probably got about 9-10 foot of the dam end. It's probably down to about 6.5, 7 now. So it's not deep by any stretch of the imagination. Well, yeah, the bird life that's something else people got to look at. Like my golden bait and maize is not the one for those 3 swims at the moment.
Yeah. Do you do anything when bird life's prevalent or not?
Well, basically, I'm not fishing in that. I won't fish those 3 swims at the moment because I'm using a visually attractive. My whole approach is to use a visually attractive bait. So there's only sort of the swims in the deep. Conker's got enough depth to be out of the way of the swans, and the coots you get with tufty torch and they're off. And any of the deeper water you're safe because the swans can't reach it, and the tufties and the coots, you just torch them. You sit there and zap them with a torch, and then they're gone. So bird life isn't a problem apart from when you've got 3 foot with the swans.
Yeah, fair enough.
And the swans are just the same thing. When I was on Nipton, I had to find a spot which was out. The swans were literally nesting 3 rod lengths behind the spot, my banker spot. So I had to make sure I had 4 3/4 foot, so then it couldn't get down to my hook bait. But I lost a really good fish on Nipton when the swans were swimming over my spot with cygnets, and I got a take. And the swan attacked the carp that I was playing in 4.5 foot of water.
So say that again. The swan attacked the carp. Why?
Right, I had a solid bag on my spot.
Yeah.
15 wraps, 4 3/4 foot of water. I got the take as the swan was swimming over the spot with cygnets. So I literally
with cygnets.
screaming
Okay,
run.
yeah,
I picked the rod up, and the swan attacks the carp because the carp's doing cartwheels underneath.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. If it's got cygnets, that would explain it.
And I lost the hook pulled, but it attacked the carp. That's bird life for you.
Yeah.
And that was one of the only daytime bites I had at that swim, which was mental because all the rest of them were coming at 3:30 in the morning.
Why do you think that is? Dissolved oxygen?
I think that was just the patrol route at that time. I think they went down the lake in the day into the deeper water, and I think, well, the reason I chose that swim was because I got my ticket in December 2014, and I started fishing it in March 2015. And for the spring, I thought they're going to come up to this bay to spawn. So I thought, well, they'll start mooching about here. As soon as the water starts warming up, they'll be mooching about because this is where they're going to spawn. So that was my thinking. And the other thing, the car park end, everybody was fishing those swims. So I thought, I'm not going to get anything going there because where the lodge was and the car park, then those were the popular swims. So I thought, when I walked around with Anthony in 2014, he took us around the lake. And as soon as I stood in this swim, I thought, this is a spring swim. I thought, this is what I'm going to do.
So do people in different swims get bites in the day, or is it mostly at night?
Yeah, well, they'll get them at different times on it. Yeah. They'll certainly get them, it's like on Acton Lower. I've not done much time on Acton Lower because I've been concentrating on the top lake, but like certainly I go down late autumn normally and have a bash. And there's one swim called First Road on the dam. And before he put all the extra stockies in, bite time was like 11 p.m. to 2:30 a.m. And by and large, if you hadn't had a bite by 2:30 a.m., that was it till the next night. Because they went back up the lake. And then a swim at the other end of Lake Pontoon. I fished it a few times in the spring, 7 a.m. or late afternoon when they went back down the lake. They either come back up the lake at 7, first light 7 o'clock in the spring, and you get a bite then. That was a good time for the bite. This was before they put the stockies in. Obviously, there's more competition now. And then you'd get them coming back out of the shallows. They go up in the shallows in the day, and then they'd move back down the lake. So you could get them late afternoon, after tea, going back down. And it was just the movements of the fish. Whereas the top lake, they do move up and down the lake, but they tend to be where they are in the lake, depending on everything from air pressure, temps, but also one of the big factors is bloodworm. You can have a mega high pressure and they'll be in the deeper water if there's bloodworm coming off. Like September, October, you can have a mega high pressure and you'd expect them to be up in the shallows. It can be a really sunny day. You think, bang on for the shallows. The wind can be hacking up on a southeasterly, nice warm wind. You think, I'll be all over the shallows, and they're not in the deep water, smashing the bloodworm. And then conversely, they've been on the back of the wind, smashing bloodworm in the shallows because the hatches seem to come off in different depths of water, in different, they come out sequentially. Sometimes, it'll come off first in the shallows, or sometimes I don't know the life cycle of it in terms of temperature, but sometimes it seems to be they come like the bottom third of the lake. There's a pile of bloodworm, and that's where all the fish are. You don't know till you wake up in the morning and it looks like a cauldron in the middle of the lake. And obviously you're set up somewhere else, just looking at them thinking, well, I dropped a bollock there. But it's in 2018, before he put many stockies in, it was just, you couldn't predict them off the weather. Normally, you've got a good idea where they should be. You can usually see them, they're showing. And his catching was a different matter before 2018. But in 2018, there were some mad hatches in August, September. And they were just they'd be on a hatch for like 12 hours and then they'd move off. So you could run around the lake and not keep up with them. It was just mental. He's never done that before or since. But there was just smashing spots of blood with them and then they'd be off. When I did my week in 2018, I moved 5 times to try and keep up with them. I turned up on a massive big low pressure it was September, one of the moon phases in September. Big low pressure, new wind, warm wind. I went right on the end of it. Big waves coming in, thought, sweet. My mate messages me. He said, mate, they're all over the shallows. So I borrowed my week's worth of gear around to the shallows, set up. He had fish all over him, didn't catch anything. I set up in the shallows, didn't catch anything. The next morning, they were in Oak. So I moved to Oak, set up on them. I had the car crash, which was my PB. And then next minute, they're all back down the dam, smashing the dam.
Mm.
So then I did 2 days in Oak. All the fish were down the dam. My mate, when he left, he was in Sandy, which is on the dam. He left, so I moved down to Sandy. Set up. By the time I set up, they were back up the lake again on another hatch. So you just could not compete with the natural food.
Yeah,
and that's what I'm saying about food value. When you've got pressured fish in a rich lake, which don't really need to eat bait, then food value is important for pressured fish. It's like the Randall, which is the biggest fish in Acton on the lower lake. The lower rarely, once back in the day, way before I joined, like in the 90s, it had 2 50-pound commons in it in the lower, which for the 90s was just mental. And the who's who of the carp world fished it. But basically, once those 2 fish disappeared, the lower didn't see a lot of pressure. And the Randall has held upper 40s on mainly naturals. It was always like 46 to 48, and there was hardly any bait going in the lower. Because there was only sort of 15 originals in and then a few stockies. So it wasn't really getting... Like when I joined Acton, there were probably 18 40s in the top lake and three in the lower. But people, of the sort of... I reckon there were 30 to 35 fish over 35 pound in Acton when I joined. Which, for someone from where I'm from, that's just absolutely mental.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
So the lower, people were just driving straight past it. One of the most beautiful lakes you've ever seen. It's got a castle in the background. It's just a beautiful lake, and everybody was driving past to get to the top lake. So all the lower fish were just literally surviving on naturals. And this 30-odd-year-old fish was holding its upper 40 weight just on what was in the lake.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. I do not doubt it.
So then if you're flicking bait at that fish, and it's a pressured fish, then I think to some extent, especially with mirrors, that food value really helps.
Psst. If you're still here and you happen to be listening on the Apple Podcast app or Apple iTunes, please take a few moments, leave me a review, let me know how we're doing with this podcast. A, it's really nice to hear from you, and B, it helps this podcast stay relevant and stay in the ratings. If it doesn't stay in the ratings, it falls behind, people don't listen to it, and obviously that means there's not much point me doing it anymore. So if you can take a moment to leave me a review, I'd really appreciate it. If you're not listening on an Apple device, I don't think you can leave us a review unless there's some means that I'm not aware of, but nonetheless, I appreciate you listening. It does mean a lot to me. And feel free to reach out on social media. That's it. I look forward to bringing the next episode to you very soon.